Learn how to build a better sign and print shop from a few crusty sign guys who've made more mistakes than they care to admit. Conversations and advice on pricing, sales, marketing, workflow, growth, and more. You're listening to the Better Sign Shop Podcast with your hosts, Peter Kourounis, Mike O'Reilly, and Bryant Gillespie.
All right, guys, we are back with the next edition of the Better Sign Shop Podcast. As always, I've got my colleague, the Sign Shop Yoda, Peter Kourounis. Hi, Pete.
What's up, everybody? Nice to see everyone again.
And we also actually have Mike, the sign burrito costume, with us this week.
I can't.
You look good in that, man.
Do I? Is it working for me?
I could see why your wife married you. You're a stud. And then
I've been saying this for years.
We've also got a special guest, an old friend of ours, Jeff Sherman, out on the West Coast. Jeff, you all sign dog.
Welcome, Jeff.
Hello. How is everybody doing? Thanks for having me in, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, happy to have you on.
Yeah, we're excited.
So the sign burrito thing, I listened to your last episode, and you had people, you put out a challenge for people to come up with new nicknames for Mike. So I hope you don't mind, but I took the opportunity to try to throw a couple together in preparation for today's session. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of throw those out there for you.
Oh, I can't wait. Let's hear it.
Please do. I don't want to be the burrito anymore, so
okay, well,
save me, rescue me.
Well, starting with that one, I'm actually just going to go with the sign chimichanga. Brian, you got the sign burrito, but I really think Mike's a bit crustier than that. I'm going sign chimichanga.
Touche.
Sign chimichanga. Okay, that's numero uno.
All right, we're just gonna go simple. Sign master general.
Sign master general.
Okay.
Sign master general Mike. You like that one or no?
No.
Let's, Mike. You got to give you got to rate each one of these. Okay.
All right, I like
chimichanga.
I like that one, but
let's back up. Sign chimichanga.
Start with the chimichanga.
That one's it's so good. I don't want to like it, but I do.
Let's sign master general. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm like 50-50 on that one. I like it. It sounds more official, but like it's not as appropriate.
Okay, well, I'm going to go to the weakest one next, but it's, topical. The sign husband. Congrats on the recent wedding.
Thank you. Yeah, that one's good.
We know we're all married to our business, as sick as that is. Here, we'll go old school. Sign your Wences. No. Okay. All right. It was a little weak. All right. and then I have to throw this out because I was listening on my headphones yesterday. I'm going to call you the Sign Podcast Barry White. Dude, those dulcet tones, man.
Barry White.
Okay, those are
the sign shop Barry White. The sign podcast Barry White. Mike, the
I'm trying
sign
to resist the urge.
Podcast Barry White. Just give us a few bars, dude.
I'm trying really hard now. I'm trying to think of a Barry White song. My brain just went totally spaced out on me. Hang on, let me look up some.
My first, my last, my everything.
Yeah. He just got married. Come on now. Did you not?
I know you'd think I would.
You didn't play any Barry White at the reception?
We didn't. I don't remember.
Oh, that's a good. That's a good sign.
Yeah. No, I don't know. That's a tough one. I really I don't want to be a Mexican, menu item. I'm kind of tired of being that, but the chimichanga is really funny. I can't help it.
All right.
It's totally random. It makes no sense.
That definitely has my vote. I think that is the most well-articulated name for you beyond just being such a plain, stale burrito.
Yeah. No, I'm I'm going to go to Home Depot and get like some brown spray paint and just make this look like it's toasted.
Yeah.
And I can
there you
wear
go.
it.
Yeah,
And-
definitely. You could do that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think are those little yellow things on your shoulder? What would that look like? What is that?
I'm assuming it's cheddar cheese, which is really inauthentic. Like, it
Cheese.
shouldn't be
Okay.
yellow cheese in a burrito. But and I guess these are tomatoes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's a V-neck burrito. Though. That's the weird part.
V-neck burrito. It looks kind. I mean, for over here anyway, it looks a little bit like a pizza. Like a pizza.
Yeah, you can't. You're not getting the full effect of it. You gotta like see.
It's like it's got a nice little fold on the belly. So that's where the crease is.
Chipotle, take note. This is how you wrap it.
This is how you wrap a tight burrito.
Yeah. But I am sweating like a pig. Like, this is really hot.
The assigned chimichanga. See, that one's got flavors. You give it a little kick to it. If you're listening to this one, let us know what you think of those 5. We're leaning towards signed chimichanga, but it may change next episode.
If you're still listening.
So where does I have to ask though, because I've only listened to a couple of the episodes. Pete, where does the sign Yoda come from?
Bryant.
Okay,
that's where it came from. I honestly didn't come up with it. I am a Star Wars fan.
Okay,
I don't warrant myself being the Yoda, but it was a name that was given on me and bestowed upon me, and I said, all right, I'll rock with it.
You gotta ride it. So this is when I had hired Pete to do videos for us at ShopFox, and I was looking for a way to introduce him. I think he had just got done with whatever clause that he had about his selling his franchise. So he came on board to do videos, and I was like, hey, how am I going to introduce this guy? And I was like,
just rolled off your tongue.
Yeah, it was something like we started with like Guru or something like that. And I was like, it just doesn't fit. So somehow, I don't know if like the new Star Wars had come out at that time, however how many years ago that was, but it stuck, man. Or maybe it was when it wasn't the Mandalorian. That was Baby Yoda.
It might, but it might have been like around that time where it came out, the first season. It might have been. I'll have to look back.
Yeah, if we're talking Baby Yoda, then Mike's got that look down totally, right?
Mike the Baby Yoda. All right. Well, no, I don't know.
No, it's too derivative.
I want to know, Bryant. Like, the sign shop Yoda rolled right off your tongue for Peter. Like, why did the sign burrito come to mind for me? Like, that's what
I was telling Jeff. You eat so many tacos and Mexican food, and like every time I talk to you, you're in the drive-thru at Taco Bell. I very rarely do I call Mike on his cell phone, but if I ever call him on his cell phone, he's like, "Yeah, hang on a minute. I'm trying to get some lunch at Taco Bell. Can I call you back?" I'm like, okay, yeah, I got you.
Okay, so that's fair. I'll give you that.
So I learned something new about Mike today. He likes ptomaine poisoning. Taco Bell special. All right.
Yeah.
I love it. Those nacho fries, man, are so good.
As we get into it, obviously anybody listening out there, you haven't been on the podcast before, Jeff. Why don't you give us your sign industry backstory?
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, I got into the sign industry on accident. Didn't know what I was getting into in the first place at all. I've been in it for 23 years now, literally through a miscommunication. My grandfather moved into a condo complex and got to talking to one of his neighbors. And they got to the part of, what do you do for a living? And the neighbor said, I do vehicle graphics. And all my grandfather heard was graphics, and I'd gone to school for graphic design. So my grandfather said, oh, my grandson does that. And the guy said, hey, I'm kind of looking for somebody for the shop. Why don't you bring him over? And so I went over, and 2 minutes after meeting the guy, I'm like, yeah, I don't do this, but I need a job, and I learn quick, so want to give it a shot? And so 23 years later, I'm still a sign guy. But yeah, it started off in vehicle wraps, basically. used to do all the stuff for Red Bull, believe it or not, out of a little tiny 3-man shop in Huntington Beach over here. We used to do all the promo vehicles. Have you ever seen those little cars, the cans on top of them that driving around?
The little Mini Coopers or whatever they are.
They did Mini Coopers at one point. They started off with, they were Suzukis. Like, I can't remember. It was a little Suzuki that Red Bull pretty much bought up every single one that they had. XJ90 or something like that, I think is what it was called. And they would retrofit those things and strap these cans onto them. And we did all the graphics for that. And this was like early digital days. So that stuff wasn't done as wraps. It was, the companies that were modifying the cars would, build the rigs and convert the trunks into coolers and then paint the things in the silver and blue. And then we'd come out and put 2-color CAD cut vinyl on it. And so we did all of those. And then we were doing all of their fleet delivery vehicles, all out of a little shop. It was crazy. Had a couple 48-inch Rolands that we were running like 24/7 just to ship kits all over the U.S.
Nice.
I haven't heard anybody say CAD cut vinyl in so long.
Really? What? Okay.
They gave me the warm and fuzzies.
What? Okay, so I'm old school apparently. What does everybody call it?
Oh, it's just always cut vinyl now.
Okay.
I haven't heard anybody put the CAD in front of it.
Okay, all right.
That's how I learned too, was the CAD cut. But
I guess
that's an old school term.
What are the other options at this point, right? I mean, you're going to do non-CAD cut vinyl, I guess. Yeah, it is a little redundant, isn't it? Okay, well, hey, thanks for the education. I'm going to head out now.
Thanks for making me feel old.
So I started off in a vinyl shop, and then I spent the last almost 19 years at a company that specialized in architectural signage, mostly interior for a lot of that. So I got a ton of ADA signage and interior sign system design and manufacture and install under my belt, and about 5 to 6 years worth of the electrical stuff as well. So it's been an interesting ride. I find myself at this point in my career kind of reevaluating where my strengths and where my weaknesses are in the sign business. For the longest time, I've been kind of the resident subject matter expert within the company. And
what does that mean?
So that meant that about 80% of my day was spent, especially since the advent of Teams, fielding messages and quick calls and answering questions to everybody in the company, from the sales side, project management, fabrication, design. Pretty much everybody, soup to nuts in the business, would hit me up with, "Hey, I've got this thing. What are we supposed to do with it? How do I design this? How do I sell it? What's the right material to use for this? How do we install this? What's the hardware I need? How do I deal with the city on this?" I mean, literally, I was like the Wikipedia of the company. It was a very odd role. I mean, technically speaking, for the longest time, my title was Vice President of Operations, but honestly, it was just, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer, But yeah, it was Ask Jeff, Forget Ask Jeeves. And yes, there's another old one for your mic. Okay, Ask Jeeves, because nobody remembers that either.
I remember that one.
Do you?
That one was cool.
All right, yeah. I actually never even used it. I just knew it was a thing. But yeah, it was like that was the company process. You got a question, you just ask Jeff. You don't look it up. You don't look into records, whatever. It's just call Jeff, figure it out, And then of course I was the resident shop box expert too, if there is such a thing.
And that's how Jeff and I got introduced to each other, was through Shopbox.
This is true, yes.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you as a follow-up here.
Sure.
In a way, you became the sign shop general, right? If you have all of these people asking you questions, you're the source of all of those answers. How does that make you feel as an owner, that you're that tied into all of those operations, all of those key components to your business that that everybody goes to? How does that make you feel as an owner?
Well, let me a couple things. Number one, and you don't know this, so forgive me for correcting you like this, but I wasn't the owner. It was the small shop when I started. There were 5 people there, but I got hired on. I was hired.
Okay.
So, there's that layer to that onion. But, it's at a certain level, it's gratifying. It's good to know that you bring a value, that people value what you contribute, that people recognize that you've got, knowledge that you can bring to help them out. On the other hand, it speaks to the kind of lack of training that went in, systemically into the company as a culture. I was just talking to somebody. I was interviewing with somebody yesterday morning and asked them what their biggest struggle was. And I'm without dropping any names, I'm just going to say this is one of the largest national companies in the U.S. that I was talking to yesterday. And I asked them what their biggest challenges were as an organization. And one of the first things he mentioned was people. Finding sign people is difficult. So often you find yourself, especially as a smaller shop, having to build your own. And that can be a challenge. It's very difficult to supplant just time and experience. You can support it, but I think the way that the situation that I ended up in, where everybody was constantly coming to me asking questions, is an example of maybe not having so good of a system of onboarding and building a basis of knowledge within the staff,
So let's start with that for a moment for our listeners out there that are always concerned about finding people. There's tons of owners out there that own their own shops, and they have the same problem, right? They have the same problem. Like, how can I find people? How can I find people? But I don't want to talk about how to find people. That's a simple, 10 or 15 minute conversation. But how do you build people up? How, in your experience, how have you taken somebody that doesn't have experience, and what have you done in your experience to build them up so that they can become sign guys or sign people, or whatever you want to call them?
Sure. I think one of the first and most effective ways of dealing with that is doing rotations through all of the areas in your business, whatever that might be. So many of us, and I mentioned this before we started here, many of us are that kind of chief cook and bottle washer as a sign guy. We tend not to be so focused on I'm a sign designer, or I'm a sign fabricator, or I sell signs, or I'm a project manager. Yes, there are companies that are structured that way, but even in those companies, the people that tend to succeed in this industry, at least from what I've seen, are the ones that are a little more rounded and at least understand how what it is that they're doing impacts the overall process. Because, every single little thing that we touch, from the sales conversations to what we recommend to the customer as the solution, to what gets designed, to get what gets produced, ultimately has an impact on the final product and how well it suits what the client needed and how happy they're going to be with it, right? So to me, to build that kind of sign person, you've got to build that understanding of the process from start to finish, and put people in different areas and let them experience the different areas. So send your sign designer into the shop. Let them work with the guys. Let them weed some vinyl. You want to discourage a sign designer from setting up quarter-inch cut vinyl copy. Let them try to weed some of it for about an hour. What else? Yeah, put them. Let them go. Maybe don't put them in the paint booth. Put them in air, but let them get around it. Let them see how things, and take them in through the metal fab shop. Let them see how the set of channel letters are put together. Again, yeah, you want to discourage a half-inch stroke on a 5-inch deep channel? let him have a conversation with the guy in Metal Fab who's trying to get his welding gun down to the inside of the channel and griping at him about, hey, you see how this doesn't fit in here? Get your salespeople through there, you know?
So what you're saying is you basically take them through all phases of your operation, from anywhere from front of the house to very deep into fabrication, possibly even into installation, I would guess as well.
Yeah. Out in the field,
right?
Sure, absolutely.
And you're getting them you're giving them exposure into all elements of what this business is, and then at the end of the day, you're hoping that they're going to pick up some of those nuggets, right? Like that there's going to be something there that resonates with them, that teaches them, that exposes them, that maybe they can find a home with comfortability in some of those aspects. But what do you do as the manager to kind of make sure that they are receiving some nuggets? Like, they can walk around and I could play around in your paint booth.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm going to learn anything. So what do you do to kind of enforce that?
So it has to be a guided activity. I mean, you need to map out, here's things that I want to expose this person to. Okay. So you're going to work with your staff. You're going to say, okay, put an agenda together for the day. Hey, I want them to spend an hour in vinyl. I want them to show them how things are cut. Show them how you load the media. Show them how things are weeded. Give them some vinyl to weed so they experience what that's like. Then get them over into this area here and show them this, that, and this. Map out an actual agenda for the day. Then you got to sit down with them at the end of the day and talk to them about it. Do a debrief with them. Ask them questions. What did you see? What kind of things made sense? What things didn't make sense? When you saw this, do you know why they were doing that? To me, any kind of training program and that's going to have value and is going to stick, my approach always goes to give the holistic, give them the how does this fit into the bigger picture, give them the why behind why something is done, rather than just this is how it's done. If I don't understand why something is done the way it's done, odds are I'm not going to quite grab onto it, or at very least, I'm not going to buy in. If I don't buy in, then it's not going to, it's not going to grab, So there's definitely an old Benjamin Franklin quote that really resonates with what you're talking about. It's a quote that I've taught about. It's a quote that I live by. It says, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, but involve me and I learn." Mm-hmm. And that's basically what you're saying here, is that if you involve them in the process, they're going to retain a lot. And essentially, yes, you can't find that in any training manual. So the only thing that our listeners need to make sure that they're doing, if there are sign shop owners out there that are doing it very similarly like to you, that you are, is that they need to have some sort of sit down, the checks and balances of it all, where they're going to sit down and they're going to say, hey, tell me what you picked up on. Tell me what you're concerned about, what you saw. What are your fears? What are your doubts? What are you excited about? Mm-hmm. And then let's kind of talk through those points. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great way of developing people in this business. I tend to really like that. The only pushback I've gotten on that in the past is how long it takes. Sure.
Right. It's not like you can give them a playbook. Mm-hmm. You're working around your operation schedule. Mm-hmm. You're working around your schedule. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can be convoluted. So that's usually the pushback there. What are your comments on that?
I mean, let's face it, no matter how you slice this onion, training people and developing people is a time-consuming process. If you're concerned about the amount of time that's going to take, think about how much time it's going to take to replace that person when they don't work out for you. Think about the time spent to recruit, onboard, and go through that. If that person doesn't succeed, failure rate, the replacement cycle and doing that is much more expensive from a time and money perspective. So put the time in and get it right. You don't get a lot of opportunities for that. Unless you want to be a shop that has high turnover. And then if you do have a shop that has high turnover, you really need to be looking at why that is.
Why?
And I can say this, that I've come from a shop that had very high turnover. And I can talk about some of the reasons why that was, and some of it really was in the onboarding processes. So I've learned through mistakes. But
well, let's talk about that. That's a really great thing to bring up here.
Yeah.
When you're talking about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to talk about turnover. So go without really putting any owner under the bus or mentioning any names.
Sure.
What are some of those obstacles that you have seen during recruitment and also onboarding?
So one of the biggest things on the recruitment side, and I know a lot of small business owners are guilty of this. Listen during your interviews. Ask questions and shut up and let the interviewee talk. So many times I've sat in on interviews where the person who's applying for the job does a quarter of the talking, maybe, or less, almost as though the business owner is more intent on selling the job to the applicant than the other way around. I don't know if any of you have experienced that or seen it, but I've witnessed it more times than I can possibly count. So yeah, shut up, listen, pay attention, let them talk to you.
What do you attribute that to? Like, hey, I'm just trying to fill the seat, or like, hey, the person doing the interview is nervous? I mean, I can kind of understand if it's a smaller shop and like you're a newer owner, like being kind of, oh, hey, I'm trying to hire somebody. This is my first couple hires. You might be a little nervous, a little prone to talking more than you should. But
I think a fair amount of it is that I need a body, people. So sometimes it's we waited too long. We really needed somebody 2 months ago, but we didn't think about it. And now we're in dire need. And so it's, get me somebody now type scenario. And yeah, there's a little bit of you're breathing, you're here. Let's get you in and see how you do. Which I don't agree with, but I've seen it. The small shop thing I think really plays into it. I mean, even at the peak where I was before, over 40 employees, there was still a small shop. You got more bodies, but it was still very much a small shop mentality, and I think that's one of the things that was always struggled with there was breaking out of that small shop mentality of the 5-man shop that it was when I started there and getting to the next level of being, a professional organization with actual hiring practices and that sort of thing. That's something that I know I've witnessed twice now, owners struggling with of getting beyond where they were when they started the organization. Because so much of both of those businesses for me was the identity of the owner. The business becomes a reflection of that owner, regardless of what the rest of the team tries to do with it. There's always a portion of that owner that's visible in that business. I listened to the last podcast and you guys were talking to TJ, was it GCI, the print company, right? Great example. I mean, just talking to him and hearing him talk about his business, that business is a reflection of him, 100%. That's the customer experience, is everything that TJ says it should be and is and talks about. That's that business, right? So I think ownership, having that influence on what the business looks like and basically having a difficulty of kind of separating themselves out of it and letting the business grow into what it can be as a bigger standalone entity to get to those larger levels. I think, people talk about the hurdle for small businesses, like the first one being like cracking that $1 million a year mark. And then the next one's the 5 million mark. And then after that, it's 10. And once you hit 10, it kind of goes exponential from there, at least from what I've heard anyway. We really struggled. We hovered around 5 million for about 10 years. Now, part of that was, 2008 recession hit. Part of that was COVID, chalk that up to what it was. But honestly, I think even if that had all been taken out of the equation, I think the business would still be, hovering right around $5 to $6 million a year, because I don't think it's been able to evolve beyond that small business mentality yet. And I think that's a struggle that ownership is going to have there in doing that. So
I think that's like a whole hour-long conversation in and of itself, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Getting past this mentality that so often we have, and like, admittedly, even I, like, personally have some of those hangups now. Like, growing up, we weren't rich and we weren't dirt poor or anything, but like, even some of the financial decisions that I make personally now are like, I'll catch myself like, oh, hey, these beliefs that were there 10 years ago when I was young and tons of credit card debt, they still bubble up to the surface sometimes. And it's totally 100% on the business side. That identity of the owner can be an asset in the very beginning, because you're driving the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Nobody's more invested than you are. But if you can't let go of the reins, and I've seen this in sign shops and other companies that I've worked for, nudge Mike a little bit there. If the owner is afraid to let go of the reins a bit, then you stall out growth. You add all this complexity and headache. Let's say, for an instance, you spend hours and hours or weeks and weeks putting all these processes in place. I know you know what I'm talking about, because you set up your Shopbox account there, your former company, and I worked with you on some of that. And then for the owner or somebody else higher up to come in and just totally just not even pay attention to the process at all, just skip the process.
Well, and you mentioned something there, and it kind of goes back to Pete's question from earlier. If as an owner you are unable to let go of the reins, and if you're unable to allow the people that you bring in to do what it is that you brought them in to do, and if you're unable to allow them a certain level of autonomy to help you move that business forward, then those people will leave. So we talked about kind of turnover and churn that I saw on an employee base. And that was one of the biggest things, was bringing people in, number one, without really fully establishing what it was that they were going to be doing, or what the role was, because it was, again, a more of a sales pitch to get them into the door rather than an actual recruiting and hiring process. But two, then once they're there, not really letting them do what it was that they needed to do, not empowering them, tasking them, but then coming in and stepping in and taking things over and not letting them do what they need to do, not letting them fail, being afraid to let them fail. Going back to the training thing, you've got to be able to let people make mistakes. You have to be willing to absorb that cost in the learning, as part of the learning process, because that is the only way you're going to learn, is to make the mistakes.
100%. Let me ask you this, Jeff.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation with somebody earlier today on one of my 8,000 meetings that I've had this week. But what was you guys did a fair bit of fabrication. Mm-hmm. Like, what was the onboarding time, and what would you peg the estimated cost at to get somebody up to speed to where they could actually produce signage for you guys?
You mean, so you're talking an inexperienced person, a green hire?
Yeah, basically. I've got this guy that I was talking to, having a very hard time finding anybody that's actually skilled in the trade. Mm-hmm. And for better or worse, that's the story for a lot of shop owners that we
Sure.
talk to.
Sure. I would say a minimum of 6 months to like have actual like solid contribution value. You'll probably start, generally figure you start breaking even around month 3 or 4 on like, what you're paying them versus what you might be getting out of them in a contribution to the production. First 3 months are a straight loss. But yeah, I would say 6 months to get to a point where you're actually like starting to make some actual profit dollars off the labor that you're getting out of them. And to have every shop is so different on how they run things. And I've it's one of those funny things, working for the same place for almost 19 years. I'm a little bit insulated from how things are done around other shops. My exposure to other shops is not nearly what you guys have, working where you did and coming in contact with so many different companies. So I do know that some places, they'll have people that just do one particular thing. Like you got a guy that just applies vinyl. You got another guy that just runs the AccuBend. You got another guy that runs the CNC and what have you. For us, we had a finish department that, they would do everything. Like we didn't have a painter or 2 painters. All of the guys that we had in our finish area they'd do plastics fab, they'd do vinyl applications, they'd do painting, they'd do prep, they'd do edge treatments, they'd do trim capping, they do, banner layups. They pretty much, were all around sign fabricators. So to get somebody from nothing to that kind of level, I mean, you're talking years. But, specifically, yeah, I'd say at least 6 months. And then again, part of that is how do you approach that? Do you do the approach that I'm talking about where do you send your fabricator out with your installer? Right? Do you take the time? Do you invest the time to give them that extra training? For me, sending a fabricator out with an installer is huge because them getting to see something out in the field or experience something out in the field may be the difference between them building something one way or building something slightly different so it's easier for install down the field, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. So. And I know that's one of your claims to fame, Mike, on the sign design side of things is like, hey, I know I've been in the field. I know what it's like to have to improvise on an install because the designer didn't do his homework on the front end.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I'm amazed at how many shops don't understand that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everybody in the shop, that has anything to do with the sign, from sales all the way down through fabrication, should always be on site on an installation. Well, not everyone, but I mean, they definitely need to spend some time out in the field with the installers because install is a totally different discipline than anything else that happens under the roof in the shop. I mean, it's a completely different animal, and it's really hard to understand until you've actually been there and done that and seen the shit hit the fan in the field, and you gotta think on your feet and figure out how to fix this because like remaking the sign isn't an option. Like it's got to be on the wall today, no ifs, ands, or buts. How are we going to do this? And seeing that happen in real time and seeing those guys figure it out in real time is amazing. I mean, like installers in this industry don't get the praise that they deserve. They are, I don't even know what the right adjective for them is, but they're miracle workers. And a lot of the things that they face in the field could and should be prevented if everybody else in front of that understood what the installers had to face. I'm a huge proponent of everybody, especially designers, going out in the field and either participating in or observing installations because there's so much to learn there that we're in this industry where the rubber hits the road is critical, and that's where it goes from a fabrication project or an art project to a construction project. And at the end of the day, signs are construction projects, and thinking about it and looking at it from that perspective is hugely valuable for everybody involved. So, I'm 100% team send everybody out. And I agree with you, Jeff, too. I saw the same thing at my shop, the 3 to 6 months to really start seeing. I don't even know at 6 months if that employee is profitable, but that's really where they start contributing and making a difference. And prior to that 6-month mark, I mean, you have to look at it as that's investment time only. You can't, even if somebody's a really seasoned, experienced sign person, they're probably not going to start contributing right away because you do things a little bit differently. There's zero consistency in this industry from one shop to the next, right?
At the very least, your shop's laid out different, right?
Right, exactly. Like, I don't know where this tool is. It's going to take me an hour to find it. Yeah, I think that if you're hiring a new employee, like, you just have to look at that first 3 to 6 month onboarding time as an investment and only an investment. And I think that's where a lot of shop owners fall short, is they're, like you said, they're so desperate to get somebody in that seat that they don't have the forward vision to recognize that this person isn't going to solve my problems right away.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while. And so then that just keeps that business owner in the mindset of doing everything themselves and not delegating and not giving people the time and space to learn and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And so then they never learn. And then that problem is never solved. It just continues to compound over and over time.
Well, so I mean, you all, Pete, you had a franchise, right? You owned a franchise. You ran a franchise.
I created a franchise. Yes.
You created a franchise.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. That's a whole.
That's why I called him Sign Shop Yoda.
Yeah. Okay. That's
created the franchise.
I was not aware of that. Okay. Well, good on you, man. That's a whole other beast there. And Brian, I know you had your shop, and Mike, you had your shop. So I mean, like, did each of you have struggles with? How did you onboard people? How did you train people?
Throw them to the fire, my friend.
Yeah.
That's the 95% solution for every shop that we talk to. Hey, watch this guy work for 2 weeks, and then, hey, you're gonna contribute. Yeah. Back in the day, I didn't know what I know now. You know, we tried. Yeah, we were in a super small town, which is always hard to find talented people. Even not experienced people, just people that had a good work ethic and could show up on time and willing to learn and put in the hours, because it's not easy work, and it's, you can't show up hungover at 30 minutes late and expect to do good work.
You can't? Oh, okay. Sorry.
I mean, at least I couldn't.
Unless you're the owner.
Unless you're the owner.
You're the owner, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, being in Southern California with, literally millions upon millions of people in the area, it's still difficult to find people who want to work and put in a hard day's work and, be willing to stand on their feet and, this, that, and the other thing. So I don't know that a small town is much worse, but I think it's just more opportunity for failure out here. But yeah, I mean, so and we did our fair amount of that, to bring them in, let them, have, you're going to weed vinyl for a week. So let's just throw a bunch of vinyl at you and expect you to do that. And that's everybody's onboarding, and then you hand them some sandpaper, and you have them start sanding things and prepping things for your paint guy, and eventually you get them productive. I don't know. That's fun stuff.
Yeah, back in the day, it wasn't a solid plan. At ShopVox, when I hired folks like Mike or anybody else, I tried to be more strategic about that and have an actual plan. Like, hey, here's your first 3 or 4 weeks. But honestly, should have extended that even further out to 6 months. So if
I think that's a tricky comparison though too, because something like training people to use software, I mean, there's a lot of nuances to it that are customer specific, but it's a little bit more of a it's a little bit more of a repeatable process where
there's no creativity
signage
involved.
is. I mean, you can get creative just to kind of quell the boredom. But I don't know if it's the same kind of creativity. I think in a sign shop because every job is so different. Even if this job calls for metal fabrication and paint and vinyl and assembly and whatever, even though the steps are fairly similar from sign to sign, every sign is so different, and there's so much. There's a huge difference from one sign to the next, and the skills required, even though they're similar on paper, there's so much thinking on your feet that has to be done. There's so much figuring it out as you go, just by the nature of this industry, that it's hard. It's hard to put a really like a hard and fast like training program in place that covers all the bases. I mean, you can teach people how to be a good employee, and you can teach them the rules of the shop and the high level stuff. But at the end of the day, like there's zero substitute for experience and just hands on, rolling up your sleeves and doing it and screwing it up a few times to be successful. And I think the only people that are successful in this business, because this business is a trade, and this is true of any trade, is the people that are successful are the ones that are going to be able to learn from their mistakes and piece that, piece a thread together there and say, okay, this is what I did. This is the outcome. It wasn't correct. If I go backwards and re-engineer this in my brain, I can figure out what I did wrong. And next time I'm going to do it this way. If somebody doesn't have that ability to do that, no matter what, like no matter how good your training program is, they're not going to be successful in this industry or any trade, right? Like you can't teach somebody to be a problem solver and a creative thinker.
Yeah,
it's just an innate.
Yeah, you gotta
when I was training owners, or when I was training employees or recruiting, the number one bucket for me was they needed to have this do whatever it takes mentality, and that kind of speaks to what Mike was just saying, but also what you said earlier, Jeff, is that, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen more than you should talk, right? So when you're interviewing those people, even in that first interview process, or even on the phone call, the first phone call during the recruitment, I'm training my owners and training my managers that whoever's doing the rehiring and recruiting, that you're looking to ask questions to see how they're going to respond in that the ideology of, will they be able to do whatever it takes to get the job done? Mike said something earlier that the people that find success are the ones that can learn from their mistakes. I'll echo that, but I'll go a step beyond that, and that people that are successful have to go into this knowing that they will make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And when they are making mistakes, yes, then what he said is right, is that they have to learn from those mistakes. So whether that's hiring the right people or hiring the wrong people, or training somebody terribly and then it didn't work out, they have to be able to make changes, whether it's incremental or drastic, in that people recruitment topic, right? Whether it is hiring or whether it is training, whatever it is, you have to be able to learn from those mistakes. One little helpful tip for some of the owners out there just that are thinking about how to prove that their training can be better or how to make their training better, there is a great tool out there called One Huddle. One Huddle, if you've never heard of it, they're based out of Newark, New Jersey, and they take they have rethought and re-implemented the strategy of how people are thinking about training and turned it into games to play. So they gamified the training platform. So you can make a course that, say, for a graphic designer, you can make a course of videos to watch. Maybe you can download them from YouTube, and that if you want to take the easy way, you can do it that way. Or you could make your own, and then you're going to give a game that you're going to play to after watching that video or reading this article or case study, and you're going to quantify their knowledge. Right. And then here's the best part. They can compete against other team members, other employees, other shops even, and being able to have like that competitive nature that games normally have. So I've seen a couple of shops go this way. There are a lot of shops that use like Trainual to develop manuals and courses and pieces and collateral and things like that. But I've seen many franchises many shops go down the rabbit hole of gamifying their training to make it more engaging. Because, like I said earlier, involving your candidate into the process by getting them to do something, compete, is a way of retaining knowledge and maybe shortening that window from what you said earlier about minimum 6 months. Maybe we can bring that down with something like this down to 3 months, or maybe even sooner, depending on the role and size of the company. But for the most part, and I think I was talking to Brian about this earlier in the week, that there's a line in the sand, right? There's a line in the sand between shop owners, shop managers, and then there's franchise owners, right? Franchise owners, when they buy a franchise, this is a little bit more in my background here. When they, like I said, I was telling this to Brian earlier, when you're buying a franchise, you're not buying, you could be buying their name, sure. But but what you're really buying is all those systematic approaches that you and I are discussing that shop owners on the other side of the fence don't have. They have to invest time and money into designing and making it themselves. Whereas, all of those playbooks, all of those manuals, all of those onboarding processes, training on how to recruit, training on how to hire, what interview questions to ask, what job descriptions you should write out, all of that has been done. All you got to do is just take it, change a couple of variables, and throw it out there in the universe for your shop. And that's where the franchising piece, my background, comes into, is that when I'm working with shop owners or shop managers on how to improve their business or their role, it's often in developing these strategies that you find in this sector of the business. Franchising in the sign business gets a bad name. We've had guests on this show that have made fun of the fact of, these little franchise locations like fast signs. They just do these little stickers.
I think the hosts have made fun.
The hosts too have made fun.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But what you're not seeing behind that fence might also add some value to what you're saying, is that if you are a shop that's struggling in these areas, that you don't have the time to coach or onboard or develop those training manuals or playbooks, whatever you want to call them, that there is an avenue for you. There is an avenue to go down to obtain all of that. Obviously, it costs money. But if you don't have time, then you have money. If you don't have money, then you must have time. So, for those of us that's what I was getting at. If you don't have time or money, go work for somebody else. Don't
start a business. Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. Something occurred to me as you were talking about that, Pete. We talk about learning from our mistakes. I want to say there's a value. Also, you need to be willing and able to learn from your successes. If you have that employee that takes off, spend time, sit down with them, and figure out what you did right, and then try to replicate that. So often we only focus on the mistakes, the areas of failure, and we lost Mike. What's going on back there? So
It's a guy in a burrito suit holding a cat.
Something you just don't see every day. That's awesome, Mike. Thank you. Guy in a burrito suit holding a cat.
My life is very strange.
Mine just got a little bit surreal as well. But I mean, learn. Don't just focus on the failures. Learn from the mistakes. Figure out what went right. If you find somebody having a moment where they make a really solid decision to change something or do something, ask them why they did it. Find out what their thought process was. Figure out what went into building that thought process and see what you can do to spread that, Just a thought off of this. Because like I said, it's so easy to go negative so often,
Yeah. You were at your former company for 19 years, you said?
Almost. 18 years, 11 months, and just at 11 months.
6 hours.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And so obviously that's a long time, especially to people in this day and age. Like I was talking with somebody else yesterday that they mentioned something about millennials think that 3 years is a long time in a job. What did they do right to keep you there for 19 years? ish?
Well, the role developed and expanded to take advantage of my skill set. I think is it was recognized where my strengths were, and I was allowed to apply my strengths into different areas. For a long time, I was allowed to contribute and have a voice. So that's kind of contradictory to what a lot of people that, like we were talking about churn, when they kind of come in and then go out. A lot of times it's because they're not allowed to, have their voice heard. And anybody, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the guy that you brought in to sweep the floors. He's got a brain in his head. He's going to have some idea about something. Giving people an actual valid and effective forum, or even just an ability to know that they can be heard and respected and valued as part for the contribution that they bring. That's gonna buy you your longevity. It really is. Mm-hmm. Money helps, sure. A lot of owners think, I just need to give raises or bonuses or this kind of stuff. Yeah, money helps, but it only buys you so much. It really does. I would not have. It
doesn't buy loyalty.
No, it doesn't. It buys you time. But, you really want to be paying somebody top dollar if they're not loyal to you, or if they're not actually, I'm going to use the word committed to the success of the company. Sure, they might be going through the motions. Sure, they might be doing a certain amount of work for you, but, it's the whole hearts and minds thing. And really that's all about validation, and it's all about acknowledgement and contribution. I heard something a while back that was like the best way to get somebody connected to you is to have them do you a favor. You would think it would be the other way around. You do them a favor and then they're connected. No, it's the other way around. You have them do you a favor, and that ties them to you. I think from a business perspective, it's the same way. Get them to contribute. Get them to know that they're contributing, acknowledge that they're contributing, and they're going to want to contribute more. There's self, people can get self-worth from that. And ultimately, in addition to money and a way of living, this is what we spend the majority of our waking hours doing every day. And if we don't feel as though we're actually contributing or doing something of value, why do it?
Amen.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said that better.
I think that's the best advice that will come out of it. No, I totally. I mean that. I've kind of beat on that horse until it's dead quite a few times too, Jeff. I mean, and I totally agree. Like, employees have a life and they're human beings just like us, and everybody wants to feel like their existence is for something. Everybody wants to feel like, whatever they're doing, whether it's vacuuming the floor, cleaning up a cat accident on a chair, or making a sign, like they want to feel like what they're doing is contributing to the bigger picture. That's just part of human nature. So, some people don't. Some people really genuinely don't care, and those people shouldn't be working for you anyway. But talking, all things being equal, like, all employees want to feel valid and valued, and they want to feel like the work that they're putting in is having an effect on the bigger picture. And I agree, like, the fastest way to ruin employee morale and drive off really good employees is to not make them feel valid, not hear them, and not give them a platform or a forum to voice their ideas and concerns and opinions, and not genuinely listening to them and running with what you hear. I mean, I think that alone is what separates a good boss from a bad boss. I mean, if there was one thing I had to say that really is the differentiator, it's a boss's ability to treat their employees like human beings and not cogs in a wheel.
Well, and it from a weird perspective too, and this is, like, we've talked so much about retention of employees. One of the things that you can do that will actually hinder the ones that you want to keep is holding on too hard to the ones that shouldn't be there or don't want to be there. That's the other thing, you have to be, and I struggled with this just as a manager, because again, it's, the whole onboarding and hiring and recruiting process can be so cumbersome and so time consuming and so energy draining that you really don't want to go through it unless you absolutely have to. So you will find it's easy to kind of like grab onto that employee and try to hold onto them and squeeze onto them for dear life. Like, don't leave me, I need you to succeed, but you have to be willing to again, you have to be willing to fail, right? You have to be willing to let them fail. And you're going to have people that you bring in that leave, for whatever reason. You have to be okay with that. You have and you have to let the rest of your staff know that you're okay with that.
Yep.
So that it's a living, breathing organism rather than kind of this stagnant pond that you could potentially create.
Yeah.
Totally. Say that again. You have to let them fail.
Yeah.
Everybody repeat it with me. You have to.
You have to let them fail.
Yes. Now we're like getting into like a seance.
Yeah.
I like it. Well,
there's an advertising agency here in Portland called Wyden Kennedy. They're a very famous ad agency. I don't know if you guys have heard of them or not. They're responsible for like all of Nike's advertising, and they're the ones that came up with the Just Do It slogan. They have a really amazing office here in Portland, and they have this giant wall on it where they did this kind of art installation. There's like 150,000 like clear thumbtacks or push pins on the wall. And they made this thing that spells out the words "fail harder," and it's a really sorry. I just got distracted. Can we hold on a second?
Mm-hmm.
It's
the sign husband.
The sign husband. He makes an appearance.
That's great. That's fantastic.
My cat shit on the chair. That's why I had to get up and take her out of here. I'm sitting here talking and I'm smelling like, what is that awful smell? And then she took a dump on the chair. It's like a common occurrence in my life. Sorry, I was texting.
It's not
Lila
a podcast episode
talking.
until one of Mike's cats shits on the chair.
How many times has that happened now?
At least 3, I think.
Yeah, it used to happen all the time when I was doing like Shopbox meetings too, and like she has a habit of walking across my desk, and then she's dropped a few right on my keyboard. Like she's an elderly cat with irritable bowel syndrome. She keeps me. And sorry about that. Anyway, there's an ad agency here in Portland, and they have this big wall that says "Fail harder," and it's kind of like their mantra. Like they encourage everybody to take as many risks as they can, creatively with clients, really push the envelope and actually hope you fail. I mean, that's really part of their culture is building failure into it, because so many great things come out of learning from failure. And I see so many business owners, especially in this, that try so hard to discourage failure, and they see somebody making a mistake as a reflection on them as a business owner. But all of us are prone to making mistakes. It's just part of being a human being, is you're going to screw up stuff. You're not going to do everything right. And none of us would be where we were if we hadn't learned from our mistakes that we made in the past. But as a business owner, for some reason, it seems like there's just like this innate, like just disregard for that like universal truism that I'm allowed to fail, but because I'm paying you, you better damn sure not fail on my time, right? And that's such a huge mistake that business owners make. Whereas you should be encouraging them, like I said, to push the boundaries and step outside of their comfort zone. And they're probably going to fall flat on their face the first couple times, and you have to expect that and encourage it, because that's how these people grow and expand and become better at what they're trying to do. And without an environment that actively encourages failure to a point, people can only grow to a point. I mean, obviously there's a point where, like, if you're just constantly doing the same thing over and over again and messing it up every time, like that's different than the failure I think that we're talking about here, right? If somebody just isn't good at their job and they're just not paying attention and making stupid mistakes, that's a totally different thing, and that person should go. But if they've had the opportunity, given the opportunity to try and fail and try again and figure it out and get a little better each time and improve, then that type of failure is good, and it's positive, and it's moving forward.
Yeah. The failure thing requires, we were talking about with the training thing, it's just like that with the failure thing, it requires the right kind of response and follow-up to a failure, some sort of questioning, and not an interrogation, why did you do this type thing, but what happened? Okay, why do you think that happened? Why do you think that resulted the way it did? Walk them through that mental process you talked about, Mike, of let's go back through the chain here, figure out, reverse engineer this, and think about how we could have done it differently and what might have been the better result, as a result of doing that. That's key to it too. It can't just be unbridled failure all over the place. There has to be a feedback loop in there, right? And it has to be done in the right tone and the right attitude and the right approach.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I've got another question for you, Jeff, and maybe this will kind of bring us full circle and try to wrap this up. I guess. What was the final straw, or what was the series of events that led you to the end of your relationship? And just to preface that, like, the reason I asked why you stuck around so long was I've noticed of our listeners, there's a lot of smaller shops. Maybe it's one owner, maybe it's an owner and a couple of employees, where at some point in time, the owner was like, hey, I'm going to grow this business and I'm going to bring somebody like you into the fold, Jeff. And I say this because I respect your knowledge base, your experience, of all the conversations we've had among these guys, Pete and Mike. You're probably one of the other most knowledgeable guys in this industry that I've spoken to. So you've stayed with that company for 19 years. Obviously something worked there for a while, but these other guys that I see that, hey, I taught this guy everything I know about the business. And then what did he do? He turned around and left and started his own shop across the street. And now, like, that, either that trust is gone or he's scared to try again, but the business is running him over still, 5 years later, 10 years later from that. So what was you're that guy, that promising number two guy that stepped in, helped grow the business, doing awesome things.
So
what caused you to leave?
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on one thing you said there for a second, and because it's applicable to my scenario. Not everybody wants to be a business owner. Not everybody should be a business owner. Okay.
I think we can all agree on that.
and early in my conversations, in my development, you talked about me being the number two. And early in my conversations with the owner of the company I worked for, there was discussion, very serious discussion about transitional plans, about eventually me being taking the business over from him, when it came time for him to retire, and ways that we could have worked that out, mechanically from a financial perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And I had to do some serious self-evaluation as to whether or not I wanted to be a business owner. And the bottom line is I don't. It takes a special breed. It takes I think first and foremost for me, the thing that I know that I don't have is the comfort with personal risk. I'm not a gambler. I hate Las Vegas. I don't like the idea of potentially losing money. I'm not comfortable with it. So I shouldn't own a business, because there is a possibility for that, very much so there. And it's just, that was the thing for me. So it was never, for me, it was never a factor of building myself up, building my skill set to a point where I felt like I could take what I'd learned and go start my own thing. That was never the issue there. For me, ultimately, it became a point of, at a certain point, my voice too stopped being heard. We got to certain points where I was trying to work with the owner to make core changes on certain front-end processes in how the business was being run, because all of the downstream, at a certain point, all of the improvements that we were trying to make on the design team and the production team and the installation team and all of the processes, on the operational side of the business, we hit a wall in improving those processes because of how we were taking orders and how we were processing quotes and how we were bringing things into the shop. And at a certain point, I started focusing on trying to implement change there, and what was met with, I'm going to say, inability. It's not knowing unwillingness, but at least an inability to make that change and to allow me to influence change there. And so at that point, I stopped being valued. I stopped contributing and developing and growing. And I started to stagnate. And then I got COVID and ended up in the hospital and had 2 weeks in the hospital by myself to do nothing but self-reflect. And then another 3 months on my couch on oxygen to be separated from the shop environment and think about how, my work life was going and how things were going there. And very quickly realized I was unhappy and needed to find some other avenue, some other place. Ultimately, I will say the last day was not my choice. The business, needs changed, and I was let go. I didn't leave myself, which was surprising. But I've been looking for months, so it was inevitable, I think, is really at that point. But yeah, to answer your question, it was about finally getting to a point where even after that amount of time, I was no longer heard. And because I was no longer heard, I was no longer valued. Regardless of how many times I was
disconnected.
Regardless of how many times I was told, "Oh, you're so important," and I value what you tell me. If your actions don't back that up, if you're not listening to the things that I'm telling you and the things that I know need to happen, in my heart of hearts, I know we need to do this, but we're not doing it. What value am I bringing? Why am I here?
Boom.
So
that's Jeff. For everybody listening, that's Jeff dropping the truth on you right now. If you're a business owner and you've got team members that are valuable to your organization, and you don't let them be heard or feel valued, they're going to leave you.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're going to check out. At the very least, they're going to check out of work, and they're going to go through the motions. And if you're not paying attention, you're not going to notice it. And then they're going to leave. And you're going to be in that 6-month cycle that we just talked about all over again, or longer, especially if you're trying to replace an ops manager or somebody that has a ton of experience on how your entire operation runs.
Speaking from experience, Bryant?
No, not at all. None.
Not at all.
Wink, wink.
So doesn't sound at all like you've said that in your head.
Dude, I've caught you throwing some shade from time to time.
So Jeff, we started this conversation off, and you said that you're in a position for the first time in a long time where you can really sit back and think about where you want your career to go in the future, and you have a little bit more control and say over that. So what do you see coming down the line for you? What do you want to do for the rest of your career in the sign industry?
I'm looking at things where I can be a little more creative. There's so much opportunity and possibility within the sign industry itself. I've been in a box of architectural signage for so long, and specifically signage for like high-rise office and hospitals. That tends to be pretty that's a small box to be in, there's not a lot of creativity involved in that kind of stuff, generally speaking. You can stretch out a little bit here and there, but ADA code and fire regulations and all that kind of stuff really, they really bring those walls in real tight. So I'm looking at things with well, number one, with where I'm at right now, my options are I'm looking bigger organizations, places where maybe they've got processes in place. They darn well better have processes in place, but places where I can come in and bring a voice that's going to be heard. That's the biggest thing. And I don't even care where it is. I mean, I'm looking into design stuff. I'm looking into project management stuff. I'm looking into operations stuff. I'm looking into department manager stuff, general manager stuff. Heck, I've even talked to a couple people about doing sales. It's that chief cook and bottle washer thing, and me having been, for a small shop for so long and having touched every single aspect of that business. My biggest thing again is, where can I contribute? Can my voice be heard? And where can it be heard? That's my thing. No amount of money is going to offset that. Well, maybe a certain amount, but we won't get into that. I've got to make a living. Let's put it that way. I do live in California, so there's that factor. But yeah, it really is. For me, it's about where can my voice be heard? Where can I bring value? And that's what all of my conversations to this point have been centered around. You look at my resume, it's a hodgepodge. It's all one company, really. But all of the things that I've done within that company, it's you name it, I've done it. So people ask me when I approach these sign shops is, what do you want to do? It's like, hey, tell me where your need is. Tell me what that biggest hole is, and let's see if I can fit it. Let's see if I can fill it. It's an interesting spot to be, honestly.
It's a difficult spot to be, too, because it's like employers don't know what to do with that. They're like, well, okay.
It requires it's a different kind of conversation. It's a much deeper conversation than the I'm going to post an ad on whatever on Glassdoor and have somebody send me their resume and sit down and do an interview with them. It's a very much different conversation. I've literally been cold calling myself to the different sign companies around the area. Reaching out, looking at all the websites and reaching out and, saying, hey, I've been in this business, 20 plus years. Let's talk. And having, hour, 2 hour, 3 hour conversations with business owners around, what do you do? Where are your challenges? And can I bring something to help you with those challenges?
Boom.
Awesome. I wish you would move someplace cheaper like Iowa, because I'd love to have you as part of my team, but I can't even come close to affording you.
Sorry, man.
If you ever move to the Midwest, let me know.
Jeff, always a pleasure, man. I always enjoy catching up. For any sign company that's out there that wants to talk to Jeff for 2.5, 3 hours, if you're looking for an impact guy, you've got a hole to fill.
Yep.
Hit me up, yeah.
Jeff will fill it.
Hey, phrasing? I don't know how that works as a recruitment tool, but okay, right on. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Our next cease and desist letter.
Another one coming. It never fails. All right, guys, let's wrap this one up, right? With rapid fire takeaways. Peter.
You got to stop talking on an interview. You got to listen more than you talk. That's going to be the biggest takeaway. It's the biggest takeaway for this episode, specifically for those that are asking about how could I hire the right people? In order to hire the right people, you need to find the right people. And in order to find the right people, you need to let them talk. You need to let them advertise themselves, sell themselves. Not sell yourself. Mike.
The sign chimichanga. No, I just think it's got a ring to it, man.
The sign chimichanga. Does it? Can you hear yourself? I think that the biggest takeaway for me is something that Jeff just kind of got done saying, and this is a guy that's got as much experience in this industry as anybody you're ever going to encounter has. And in a way, got a buffet of choices in front of him for where his career goes in front of him. And what he just said is that he doesn't care what he does, whether it's design, fabrication, installation, sales, or whatever it may be, whatever role that is, Jeff can do it, and he doesn't care. He wants to be in a role where he can contribute, he can move the needle, and his voice is heard. Everybody needs to let that soak in. His experience doesn't matter. He just wants to have a voice wherever he's at, and that's huge. And that's true of, I think, every single employee out there, with a few exceptions. And I think that's a really critical takeaway for everybody to really let that soak in.
100%. Jeff, anything else you want to share?
Oh, I think I've said enough. I think I'm gonna echo Pete's thing and say listen more, talk less, and I'm gonna heed my own advice and listen more and talk less right now.
Perfect. Well, for me, yeah, Mike said it best, man. Employees want to be valued. They want to feel like they're part of the organization. They're not family. I always kind of struggle when say, hey, we're a family here, because we're not. Like, I have a family. They're why I do part of what I do. But also, I want to feel valued. We all want to feel special for us younger generation. I don't even know why I say younger. Like I'm getting ready to turn 35. So I wake up with neck pain every day. So I guess I've lost the permission to use younger at this point. It doesn't
get better, Bryant. Just so you know, it doesn't get better.
The next 5 years for you you're in for a world.
Oh, yeah.
Like, those are the 35 to 40 were the hardest for me. The aging that happens in that short amount of time is incredible.
Guys,
I look forward to meeting it head on.
I just turned 48 2 weeks ago, so yeah, I'm feeling a whole other level of. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, a great episode. If you would like to be a guest on the Better Sign Shop podcast, what do? You email hey@bettersignshop.com. Check us out. What else do we have, guys? What else are we supposed to say, Mike?
Join the Facebook group and join the mastermind group.
Yeah.
It's worth your time.
Yeah, if you're a sign shop owner, check out our Better Sign Shop community. It is a private, safe space. We screen everybody for ownership, so it's just owners there. Talk about whatever you want. Vent a little. Come chat with us. What else? Anything else? Nope, that's it. Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening to us ramble on.
Awesome.
We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate
Jeff,
it.
Thank you, sir.
Take it easy.
All right, guys. We'll see you.
If you liked this episode, make sure you hit subscribe to get all the latest episodes, and check out our website, bettersignshop.com. Get free resources and helpful tools on growing your shop. Thanks for listening.